Hey business students! Today, we are looking at the two different approaches to employee relations, centralized and decentralized. This is a crucial part of Area of Study 1, Unit 4. The centralized approach to employee relations is the determination of wage and conditions of work being conducted by the government with unions and employer bodies, which created awards. Awards refer to legally binding agreements, setting out minimum wages and conditions for a group of employees. This approach focuses on an entire industry or occupation and involves more intensive union involvement, allowing an unlimited right to strike. Fair Work Australia has significant dispute resolution powers in this approach and provides protection for workers. It allows for disputes to be solved externally, and decisions made are legally binding. The advantages of a centralised approach include, firstly, that centralised wage fixing provides a degree of justice and equality for workers employed by different employers and organisations. Secondly, governments have greater control over wage outcomes, so they can maintain better management of the economy. Thirdly, industrial disputes within businesses can be reduced because awards cover entire industries. Finally, stability and predictability are enhanced, as it applies to all industries and organisations. The disadvantages of a centralised approach to employee relations include, firstly, that the system is less flexible. This is seen through the same wages and conditions for a large organisation in a capital city, also applying to a small business in a small town. Secondly, it doesn't provide enough opportunities for individual businesses to provide improvements in employment conditions in return for productivity gains. Thirdly, large unions are favoured due to money and resources to mount expensive legal cases before industrial tribunals. Finally, there is less incentive for participative approaches to management, as decisions on wages and conditions are not made within the organisation. The decentralised approach to employee relations is a system where decisions regarding wage and conditions of work are reached at enterprise and workplace levels. In this approach, setting out employee relations is done using enterprise or collective agreements, and common law individual contracts, meanwhile, act only as a safety net. All of these methods are used to ensure that once entered into, employees are better off overall than they would be on minimum wage, and working conditions set out in their award. Enterprising bargaining is the process of directly negotiating wages and employment conditions between employers and employees at the enterprise level, whereas collective bargaining is determining the terms and conditions of employment through direct negotiation between unions and employers. Both of these processes lead to a collective or enterprise agreement being formed, which is a negotiated agreement between an employer and a union or group of employees. In this system, there is a focus on the individual workplace, and employees have a limited right to strike. Fair Work Australia has reduced powers regarding dispute resolution, as workplaces are expected to have their own processes in place. The advantages of a decentralised approach to employee relations include, firstly, that there is flexibility to introduce employment conditions that take into account the individual characteristics of each workplace. Secondly, that greater communication between employers and employees can improve staff motivation through the development of greater cooperative spirit. And finally, that greater effort to productivity improvements by employees can be rewarded. The disadvantages of a decentralised approach include, firstly, that there is unlikely to be a greater inequality between the wages of skilled and unskilled workers, as unskilled workers have less bargaining power. Secondly, that the government has less control over wages, so management of the economy is more difficult. Finally, there is less involvement of centralised tribunals, which could lead to industrial disputes dragging on. Possible SAC or exam questions relating to this topic can include explaining what the role of the HR manager is in a decentralised or centralised system, explaining what is meant by either a centralised or decentralised system, evaluating each of the approaches, comparing the similarities and differences between a centralised and decentralised approach, outlining what is meant by the terms awards, collective agreements, collective bargaining, enterprise agreements, or enterprise bargaining, and finally, outlining the role of fair work and how disputes are resolved within each approach. Thanks for watching and happy studying!